Good afternoon and welcome to our latest People Management webinar. My name's Rob MacLachlan. I'm the editor of People Management and your host today. As you know, we have three presenters. Gareth Jones will outline the broad picture on social media at work. Al Shah will talk about the systems used at GlaxoSmithKline and the business benefits. And Lucy Turner will look at the implications for HR policy and practice. Two of our presenters today were actually recruited for this webinar by using social media. One of the original speakers had to drop out on the day People Management's February issue went to press, in which we needed to tell people about today's lineup. So we posted an appeal on Twitter and Facebook for possible speakers. Within a couple of hours, we'd not only filled the vacant slot, thanks to Lucy Turner responding to our tweet, but also added another speaker, an IT professional from a company with possibly the most developed program of internal social media in the country, but one that hadn't appeared on our radar before. That's Al Shah of GlaxoSmithKline, who got in touch via Facebook. So there's quite a dramatic example already of how using social media can boost speed of communication, reach people you'd never have reached by other means, and spark new ideas and working relationships. Of course, it often takes an experience like this to change our ways of thinking and working. But you can be sure People Management will be using social media more and more to develop story ideas and identify contacts, including, by the way, the People Management LinkedIn group, which now has more than 3,600 members. Before we get down to business, I'd like to acknowledge Oracle, whose sponsorship makes it possible for us to offer this webinar free of charge to you, the audience. And we'd like to begin by inviting you, the audience, to respond to our first poll question, which is going to come up on your screens now. So here we are, and it's going to be up here for about 15 seconds, so please click on one of the answer choices as soon as possible. And the question is, which of these statements best sums up your policy on staff use of social media? So it's not appropriate because of potential distraction from work, or we cautiously welcome it but monitor carefully in case it's abused, or we aim to empower staff to decide for themselves how to use it. So I'm now going to close that vote. 3, 2, 1, close. And we'll have a look at the results in about 10 minutes' time. Meanwhile, on to the presentations. While the presenters are speaking, you're invited to email any questions from the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. And by the way, you can also use that dialog box if you've got any technical issues to put to us. Now, towards the end of the webinar, we'll have a panel discussion answering some of your questions. So do keep them coming in. Which takes us to our first presenter today, and that's Gareth Jones, who I hope is going to start by explaining where the name Brubaker HR came from.
Hi, Rob. Hello, everybody on the webinar. Yes, well, my name is Gareth Jones. I'm a community and social media engagement person, I guess, for want of a better word. And Brubaker HR is actually, the Brubaker name is the name of a movie. It's a 30-year-old movie with Robert Redford in it. I recommend you watch it. This is essentially the story of a guy called Henry Brubaker, who was a reform warden sent into the worst prison in Texas to reform the prison, and instead of going in as the warden, he went in as an inmate. So he was definitely a braver man than I, and spent some time, I don't know how long, as an inmate in the prison, I guess getting an inside view. And I think for me that's the basis of the business, and the thing about social media for me is that he got an insight as the original undercover boss that he wouldn't have got going in as the original leader of the prison. So, and that's effectively what my business is about. So will that do you, Rob?
Fine.
Excellent. Okay. So I'll kick off. So I'm going to just sort of outline that the title of the webinar is about is it a threat or an opportunity, and I'm very much on the opportunity side. And I put a quote in here from me, which is essentially saying that opening up the water cooler conversation, which is how I see social media working within organisations, is probably one of the biggest opportunities in our working lifetimes to improve business performance. And I think certainly in my working lifetime as a Generation Xer, I think that effectively what happens, what social media will enable for us to do and have conversations internally will be very, very powerful, and will be, I think, at the core of engagement as we move over the next sort of 5, 10, 15 years. And part of the reason I say that is some of the work that I do is with clients and companies working externally, and if you look at the external activity. So some people on this webinar, if you talk to your marketing functions, you will know that your organization is already engaging with customers and potential candidates, using community tools, specifically if you're big enough, certainly using social media tools to sort of talk to customers, have open conversations, and get some significant benefit from that, whether that be support community for customers or just engaging, getting loyalty, using that environment, using social media to build trust, build brand advocacy, create openness, collaboration. There are so many things available there, and a small number of companies are already doing this externally. But when you look at what's happening, even with the ones that are doing this externally, some of them, from an internal perspective, if you look at the slide, they're really just shutting this whole conversation down. And for me, there's a massive opportunity to flip that conversation, to flip those techniques back into the organization and do exactly the same as you are on the right-hand side of that slide, on the left-hand side, and that's embedding social tools, and some of them are specifically internal tools, but creating the opportunity to innovate, get feedback, get insight, create loyalty and advocacy inside the organization. And if you're really smart as an organization, join those two up and kind of make it kind of seamless. But what's happening there is HR particularly, even when they're leading an external charge outside, they're cutting it down inside. And I think this is, for me, a core issue that we need to address as organizations. We need to overcome that. But all of this really, by doing that, is effectively killing the conversation. And conversation is a hugely powerful opportunity within organizations that we're just not leveraging. And when you go on to see the slides from Alan and Lucy, they'll be sort of articulating some of that, how that can work in the organization. And ultimately, what really that's a control issue. And I think as organizations, because this is relatively new, because of what it represents, there's a huge sense of we're losing control here. And that's something that I think we, as organizations, we need to come to terms with. The slide here, it's a fairly dramatic picture, but I chose it on purpose because when I'm talking to organizations, particularly HR functions, about it, it's a very dramatic response to social media from a negative point of view, which I think we really ought to address personally. So, and you know, there's a lot of stories in the news. You'll have heard of the John Flexman case, for example, where we're talking about his apparent sacking because of his profile on LinkedIn, which actually isn't the case. The facts of the matter are that BG hasn't really spoken about that case, but he has was putting information on his profile that was potentially in the public domain, sensitive information they thought, and it was also within his CV. But we kind of got involved in a bit of hysteria over it because, you know, that's how it was reported. And I think the problem with those kind of reportings is that it undermines what we're trying to achieve here with social media and undermines the opportunity. So And I think Matthew Davis quoted at the social media conference in December from the CIPD. He's the UK HR director at Logica. One of the quotes he said was, employers need to participate in the conversation. I think those are really key words, on an informed and authentic basis. And that means, as a company, saying, look, we're not perfect all the time, and admitting mistakes, which is absolutely key. And this is what effectively social media is creating an environment to do. So 3 points to finish from me, and food for thought really for everyone. First of all, you no longer control access to the technology or the content of the conversation, so stop trying to. We'll access it, employees will access it on their smartphones, and they're having the dialogue that's not controlled, and to try and stop it, I think, gets in the way. Recognize the huge benefits of opening up the conversation, trust, authenticity, collaboration. I think we've forgotten what engagement really is about, and it is about these kind of things, and I think this social technology, social movement will form a big part of our engagement strategies going forward. The conversation's happening anyway, so be part of it rather than just the subject. So get involved in the conversation, don't fear it. And social media exposes cracks in your engagement levels. It doesn't cause them. And that's, I think, a big point. This is not, social media isn't an issue in that sense. It's things are coming out about the organization. It's simply because they exist already. And there's a bigger picture here. For me, social media is the power of the internet manifesting itself as it matures, but it's here to stay. And I think we really need to get with the program on understanding that. And finally, again, a huge opportunity. Social media isn't just a marketing channel, which is how we're seeing it emerge mainly at the moment. For me, it's the biggest opportunity to gain insight into your business management by walking about. So that's pretty much it from me. Social media gets a big thumbs up, and I think it's a huge opportunity. We just have to embrace it.
Gareth, thank you very much for kicking us off. We're having a lot of emails already, and I just want to say, yes, we will be making the slides available, and indeed you'll be able to download all the presenters' slides and also access the audio recording of the full webinar by the end of this week on the People Management website. We've had at least half a dozen people asking that, so I'm glad to be able to clarify. Gareth, before we move on, can I put one question that has come back, I think in response to one of your early slides, the water cooler slide, because Gemma at GFHR asks, is there not a danger that social media conversations will replace face-to-face conversations?
I think email's already done that, hasn't it? That's my view. I don't think so. I mean, from my experience, I can only speak from my experience, is that what social media has done is has kind of brought people together more than it has pushed them apart. I mean, in big global organizations, I'm sure Al will talk about it. People aren't seeing each other face-to-face anyway. The best they are doing is perhaps video conferencing and sharing emails or phone calls, and social media adds another dimension to that. Of course, it can't replace face-to-face, but I don't see at all that social media will mean that we'll never talk to each other face-to-face again. I think it creates a level of conversation that draws you in to getting to know people better personally.
Thanks, Gareth. So let's have a look at the final results from the first audience poll question. And just to remind you, the point of this question was to indicate the level of trust in empowering employees and in social media, and what happens when we put those two things together. And it's interesting that we've got 3 in 10 people working from the bottom are adopting a high trust policy already. it's basically up to staff to decide how to use social media. But more than half of you are still have some doubts, are cautiously welcoming, but also carefully monitoring. So the other poll questions will illuminate how the HR profession is approaching social media in more detail. So can we have the second poll question up now, please? So this is asking you, the audience, which of these different aspects have you devoted most time at work to in the last year? We've got the dangers to reputation or productivity. We've got the more obvious use of social media to improve communications, but also less obvious applications, for example, creativity, enhancing creativity. And then we've got the talent pipeline recruitment aspect of it all. So if you could finish voting now, please, we'll shortly take that slide down. 3, 2, 1, close. And we'll come back and have a quick look at the results of that poll once we've heard from Al Shah. So over to you, Al.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you all for this opportunity. I hope you find this as enlightening. My role in GlaxoSmithKline as social media demand manager means that my job is to help the business derive the value from using social media technologies internally. I'm soon going to be moving on to becoming an independent and working as a social media business consultant, helping other organizations develop their digital strategies. But first, who is GlaxoSmithKline? We're a Tier 3 sponsor of the Olympic Games, so you'll hear a lot more about us in this coming year. But in the background, we're famous for making lots of healthcare products. We do Lucozade, Ribena, Zantac, etc., and obviously Beecham's powders. But we're a diverse set of companies. We've got research and development, global manufacturing, consumer sales, and pharma sales at the other end. And we're spread across 70 different countries. That makes us a cultural hodgepodge we need to try and sort out. It's very important for us to try and begin to work across our boundaries and find subject matter experts and talk to each other across the organization. But we have a number of challenges which are very similar to any size business, and that's because although we're one of the world's largest farmers, we're actually made up of many smaller companies, and each function, if you like, works as a siloed individual company. So our approach to social media internally was to say to the corporation, this is a concept, it's not actually a tool, it's not a set of tools, it's actually a way of working. And so we took something like this Brian Solis diagram that shows a plethora of applications that come and go in this space all the time, and we simplified it. What does this mean for the corporation? So getting a consistent view basically says that it's all about collaborating, sharing thoughts, sharing documents, and socially connecting with one another. In short, it's really all about creating a digital dialogue between two or more people. Now, some of our seniors and quite a few more skeptical people say to us, don't we do this already? Don't we collaborate and share things already? What is this new way of working actually going to give us? So this table on the right-hand side, you see the blue text, is really some of the derived benefits from this new way of working. I'm not going to go through each of these, but I'll just touch on a few important ones. People today use email to collaborate, and they have done for many years. They send documents to each other to be updated, etc. If you start to share those documents with several people on email, you lose thread very quickly. And that's why moving that into a wiki or a team site in SharePoint, you can raise the efficiency and simplicity of working that way. But others more important are breaking down silos, which is a common problem for many organizations. Having the organizations being able to discuss openly problems that they're working on with others in other functions across the company helps break those silos and gets real subject matter experts to the fore. And also employee engagement, giving every employee a voice and then listening to it allows them to feel more engaged with the organization. You get much more intrinsic value. Basically, they do this at home anyway, Facebook and other technologies, so why not bring it into the workplace and help them work that way? Talking of those values and social media in general, in GSK, it's not a new thing. The word social might be new, but the need to socialize has been around for many, many years. In the top left, you see here, People Connect. This is an application that our global manufacturing team put together around 6 years ago. In those days, nobody called it social, but what they needed was a way for profiles for people to be shared amongst the company so that people knew who the subject matter experts were that they could talk to. Likewise, we have several idea engine generation tools where people can come up with an idea, vote on it, and share their thoughts. Our Salesforce use Ding to talk to each other. The more that we wait, the more of these sorts of little applications are sprouting up and the organization's making use of them. We've introduced My Sites to give every member of GSK their own web space so they can create their own wikis, discussion boards, blogs, etc. It's a way of slowly introducing social to them. One in particular was a freebie experiment we're doing with Yammer. Yammer is a microblogging tool. It allows anybody to be able to raise a comment that the entire company can see and comment back on. And the reason I'm picking this one to show you is because some unanticipated benefits can be derived from these sorts of tools. Initially, we used this to help break down these cross-functional, cross-boundary collaboration issues that we had. But we've ended up reducing the number of help desk tickets because the community began to help itself. As somebody raised a question, somebody else within the community found an answer for it rather than waiting for the traditional help desk route. And we also reduced email. That's something everybody wants to do, but using these sorts of tools, it's very easy to get there. Taking those benefits a bit further, you might also hear this in your companies. People say to you, well, what's the return on investment on social media? That's a very difficult subject, and in fact we could talk for hours on that. But basically, I'm saying there's a lot more to be gained than just a monetary value. Here's a couple of examples. Top right, we have a research and development community called Mingle, where one particular person thought we could produce a child-friendly version of our antacid. So they wanted a pediatric market, but they need to use alcohol as a stabilizer. So they put out a question on a chat system in Mingle to say, does anybody know what else we could use? And a completely different person in another function who had a previous life as a doctor came forward and said, we've tried different things and nothing works as good as alcohol. So that closed that drug discovery down, that trial down very early, at almost no cost, just a matter of time. In the traditional route, that would have been several $1 million and around 6 months of work. The bottom right is a competitive edge example where on a Friday afternoon we put out a request for a blood specialist for the Gates Foundation. And by Tuesday we were already thanking them that not only had we found somebody, but we'd won the contract. Very few technologies would help you do that kind of thing at that sort of speed. The last one, the discussion boards, create self-help communities. Developing a sense of community of sharing is really a prime benefit. I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to leave you with a few takeaway advice notes. First and foremost is develop trust. Some people will say, have senior members put controversial topics onto discussion so that they can show the audience that these things are permissible and we'd like you to talk openly. I don't think that works on its own, because quite often the staff will say, well, it's all right for him to say that because he's not going to get fired. What I would recommend, if the company's willing, is that a peer or a lower member of staff post the controversial topic and have a senior member positively respond to it, showing that, look, we can have these open discussions. We do want to hear what your issues are. Think also about what you might turn off. Some companies turn Facebook off, for example, at their firewall. This is a bit silly because if anybody wants to use Facebook, they just get the smartphone out and carry on using it. So all you're actually doing is developing mistrust. The idea really is to embrace these new technologies, try and use some Facebook groups to get the community discussing things, but obviously understanding what the risks are and what they can and can't talk about. And finally, self-moderation in the trust area. What I'd say is please, please don't rewrite anything that's written. Have a self-moderating policy in place where if you post something in the UK in a trivial manner, just a joke, but somebody in another country finds it deeply offensive, they should have a simple and quick option to be able to say, could you remove it? If you actually rewrite what people say, they'll stop writing, and that's a damaging factor. So develop trust. Next is fun. We found with Yammer was that we put that system out there and let people use it for whatever they want to do, so viral take-up. And initially they talked about what they saw on TV that week or what was going on in the politics, etc. But in time, they began to talk about work. And what I recommend to you is that give people time to familiarize themselves with the applications, have fun doing it, and then eventually you'll find that you'll reward the business. And last but not least, don't force the issue. We found that when we showed people that using profiles you can find subject matter experts very quickly, they thought, right, by the end of the day, everybody in my group's going to have a profile, a photo, and some bio. All that happens is the reluctant few will put on pictures of Daffy Duck or Mickey Mouse, and they'll put on very little bio. We don't want that. And we want you to keep updating profiles too. So people need to understand the value and then be drawn intrinsically to want the profile. I'm going to pass the baton back to Rob now.
Thanks, Al.
I'd love to keep the conversation going, so do please get in touch.
It's great to get such a practical insight into some of the social media applications and to the business benefits. I must say I learned some new words from your presentation the first time I saw your slide about the different media available. So I guess that will have expanded many people's vocabulary today. Al, one specific question arising from your presentation. It's from Jenny Allison at Santander.
Okay.
She's asking, is GSK restricted in any way by regulation due to your product or the character of the medical profession in how you use social media?
Yes, that's a great question. We are a highly regulated pharmaceutical, so we have to be extremely careful in what we say and how we say it. It did take around 8 months to convince our legal and risk boards to accept a self-moderating policy. Initially, they wanted to check everything that anybody ever wrote on any blog or post or comment or anything within the social space inside the company. Now, that would have involved a significant number of people employed just to read what gets written. But as I said before, as soon as you rewrite somebody's work, they will stop using it. It's a bit big brotherish. Instead, we opted for a self-moderating system with some education, helping people understand being respectful and being careful what you discuss, because even though it's internal, what you say might end up being admissible in a legal case if a drug or a product or some issue finds itself into a litigation. But don't stop it. You can't stifle it. People talk about this stuff in the pub or wherever anyway. So bringing it into control is the important bit.
Thanks, Al. The message as I hear it is if GlaxoSmithKline in its business environment can have a high trust policy, anybody can.
Yes.
But let's move on and have a look at the results of the second poll question, please. If we can have those on the screen now. So this is giving some insight into how you, the audience, as the HR profession, sample of the HR profession, have actually experienced the demands on your time from social media in different ways. And what strikes me here is that all of these potential demands have been very significant in the last year. The communication side of everything is obviously top of the poll. Managing the dangers to reputation or productivity, I would say that the reputational issues are what tend to be picked up in the media most often. And I suppose I would be slightly surprised that perhaps a higher proportion of people haven't been giving more attention to developing the recruitment and talent management side of things. So, interesting results. Let's move on to the third poll question now, please. The third and final poll question. And this question is prompted by, obviously, the industrial tribunal case that Gareth referred to a bit earlier. So can you tell us, please, and click as soon as you can, what your main thought is in relation to employees putting their profiles on LinkedIn? Is your thought that it's dangerous, this is a threat in some way, or it's an opportunity to promote the organization, to get them to say nice things, or do you just feel proud that you've got such well-connected, adventurous employees? And we can already see that there is an overwhelming majority going for the third option. But we will come back to that after our third presenter. So I'm going to close the vote now. 3, 2, 1, close. And invite Lucy Turner to give us perhaps a more specific insight into the implications of social media for HR policy and practice. Over to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Rob. Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for joining us today for this online webinar. I'm a freelance HR consultant and work with a range of different types of businesses, and have been exposed to those businesses with a zero-tolerance approach to social media, a flat refusal to engage in it whatsoever, through to those that are very freely enabling their workforce to use social media, and they're also using it for very specific reasons, both internally and externally within their businesses. So hopefully I'll be able to offer a reasonably balanced view and some practical considerations for those of you working in HR to go away and perhaps consider in your own organisations. I think there are 4 key implications for HR practitioners to bear in mind. This is a new virtual dynamic. It's not new in the sense that, as Al explained, everybody's had a need to socialise. That said, this idea of virtual and online socialising is a new dynamic. I think the important thing to be clear on, and it's where you can start to influence your organisation to think a bit more strategically about social media. What are they hoping to gain from it, and what is their position on the use of social media, both internally and externally? There are, of course, occasions when social media goes wrong. We've seen a lot of the recent headline cases, but also, and I'm fully embracing of social media, there's lots of opportunity and positive trust development that can be done with social media in organisations. So managing this virtual dynamic, it can't be ignored. As HR practitioners, it is something that we need to have an understanding of, an appreciation of, and it is impacting on the workforce. And I did like Al's point earlier about the fact that if you cut off Facebook from your desktop computers in the organisation, we're going to have employees accessing social media via their smartphones. You know, it's so accessible, it's everywhere we go, and we need to understand that and recognise that it is a worldwide phenomenon impacting on people day to day. There's a whole generation of our workforce who have grown up with this. You know, the Google generation, this is how they communicate, it's how they organise their social lives, it's how they plan what they're going to be doing during the course of their week. So there is a whole generation who engage with social media almost as their primary form of communication. And ignorance is not bliss. I would suggest each and every one of you involved in HR to go away from this webinar and think very proactively about how you could sensibly use social media within the business. The key thing is to establish the organisation's position. Here there's an image of everybody sort of jumping on this social media bandwagon. I do have a Twitter account myself, a LinkedIn account and so on. My Twitter account is very much about promoting the work that I do with a little bit of background about myself. The Facebook account, that's very much a social account. It's closed, it's private, that's what I keep for my social activity. And LinkedIn is very much about client contacts and relationships. You need to think about, in the context of your organisation, what media are you going to use, how are you going to use it, and what are you trying to achieve from it. And again, where are you going to sit on this spectrum? Is it a zero-tolerance approach to social media, or are you going to fully embrace it and encourage employees to engage with it and develop trust? Think about the message that that's going to communicate to the workforce. A zero-tolerance, again, it can generate mistrust. Fully embracing does develop a sense of liberal trust across the organisation. And establish a social media policy. I'm not a fan of policies for the sake of policies or unnecessary bureaucracy, but that said, if you're very clear in your communication with the workforce about exactly what you're going to use social media for and what the expectations are of the employees using social media, then everybody's clear, the expectations are there on paper. And as I've touched on, be clear on the purpose and what outcomes you're hoping to gain from its use. Now, what happens if it all goes horribly wrong? I was involved recently in a case where a member of staff phoned in sick, and then on the Monday morning it was very evident from his Facebook page that he'd posted pictures of himself enjoying a golf holiday in Portugal, not quite the in-betweeners holiday that we've got here, but nonetheless his real reason for his absence from work was not sickness. It was, in fact, a quick holiday with the lads in sunnier climes. Now, don't be put off by the fact that this evidence is evidence from a social media source. If you were carrying out an investigation into an allegation of misconduct, then you would look into taking witness statements, you'd look into gathering the appropriate information and evidence that you needed, and if that evidence happens to be something that's been posted on a social media site, then you're quite within your rights to use it. You do have to be a little bit mindful of virtual workplace bullying and harassment. Just be very clear on where your organisation stands. Again, it's no different to workplace bullying that actually takes place physically in the organisation. It's just happening via a virtual medium. There have been various cases. One most recent one was a Virgin Airline case about people making defamatory or harmful statements about the employer. Again, be clear, communicate to the workforce what your expectations are of them. We're prepared to engage in social media as a business, but we don't expect you to be making defamatory or harmful statements that could affect the business of our organisation in doing so. Restrictive covenants. Who owns the social media content? I'm sure you're very familiar with the recent LinkedIn case. It is a very grey area, and what we're going to have to learn from each individual test case is how we then apply that in the context of our own organisations. It's one to keep an eye on. It's new case law coming through the courts, and I can't sit here now and give you a definitive answer on who owns the social media content in your organisation. It will be a judgment call based on context, who's generated the content, what that's been used for. So one to keep an eye on. And then when social media goes right, and as I said at the outset, I'm fully embracing of social media. I think it's a phenomenally powerful tool, not just for developing positive PR, but also, and I've got an example here of Liberty London, we've done some work with them very recently. They're building their employer brand via the use of social media. They use it in two ways. One is as a store to promote products, to promote in-store events, to promote their sales. They also use it to promote what it's like to be an employee of Liberty. And if you are on Twitter, keep an eye on @Liberty Careers, and you'll see that they're proactively talking about the employment relationship at Liberty, the sorts of things you can enjoy as an employee of Liberty, current vacancies, celebrating successes, welcoming new people on board. It's quite an innovative use of social media to promote the employer brand. It is useful for internal communications, and I won't go into too much detail on that given the content of Al's presentation. All I would say, though, is don't let it replace those crucial face-to-face conversations. I think as well, I touched on earlier the fact that there is a whole generation of our workforce who communicate via social media. That is their preferred mode of communication. It's what they've grown up with. So a zero-tolerance approach to social media could potentially alienate a whole generation of the workforce. And I personally feel that if you positively engage with social media and you have a very clear outline of employee expectations in terms of their engagement with social media, it can engender trust and quite positive working relations. So that's it from me. If you did want to get in contact, there's my details, and I'll hand back over to Rob.
Thank you very much, Lucy. And I'm looking at the questions that have been coming in while you've been speaking. There's one I'd like to put to you now, and it's from Riz, I think it is, at United Biscuits. Can we discipline an employee for their comments about the company or about other employees on social media?
The short answer is yes. I think you've got to make it very clear in your company disciplinary procedure that defamatory statements or victimization of an employee, whether that be verbally or virtually, could constitute gross misconduct, and you would treat that in the same way as you would if somebody was having those conversations physically in the workplace. It's no different, really. So in answer to your question, yes, you can, but given the growth of social media, it would probably be sensible to make reference to the fact that comments and statements on social media sites will also be taken into account.
Thanks, Lucy. So we're going to give you a short breather before we come on to the panel discussion in a moment.
Thank you.
And that gives us a chance to look at the results of the third audience poll question, please. So these were the reactions or the first thoughts that come to mind when you hear about employees putting their profiles on LinkedIn. And we can see there that as one I would hope might expect, the HR profession is overwhelmingly positive about employees being confident and connected and proud to have such people in their companies. So this is clearly the strongest result of all of our audience poll questions, and suggests to me an enormous goodwill and desire to encourage social media within the profession. So that's good to see. Now we have just short of a quarter of an hour to follow up some of the issues that Gareth and Al and Lucy have tabled for us. And we've had an amazing number of questions emailed in. I reckon we've had at least 100 emails from you, the audience. So I'm just going to take some of the questions which seem to touch on broad themes that many of you are raising. And the first one is from S. Saki at Ford. And a short question: how can you draft a social media policy so that it doesn't interfere with productivity at work? I think I'd like to ask Gareth for your view on that first.
Okay, yeah, well, my thought would be that if you've got a work productivity problem, then you've got a work productivity problem. And social media might bring that to the fore, that if people are looking for a reason to bunk off, do less, spend time doing other things than the job they're doing, they're either unhappy in their job or unhappy in the company. And again, this is where I think the confusion comes in, and where I think social media gets a hard run. These are all cultural issues. These are all engagement issues that exist already, but you've been able to ignore them probably. And I think part of the key thing here is you just got to embrace it. And understand that there's a problem with people who are not engaged in their job, and that's that's a management leadership issue. It is not a social media issue, in my view.
And Al, this is clearly an issue that you will have faced in GlaxoSmithKline.
It is, Rob. It's a common question. I think there's a couple of issues here. We found more of a problem with some of the more concrete middle layer, as our CEO calls it. It's that those senior managers who haven't quite embraced why people would need to work this way or what the benefit's going to be. And I say that because we've been to a few of them and said, you need to, if you got yourself a blog and told people about what you're doing and what you're thinking, then solicit feedback and comment from them. And they say to us, why do I want to do that? My kids have got blogs and they tell each other what they've had for breakfast. What use is that going to be to me? And I see that as being internet fads. They've cottoned onto some of the terminology and thought about the negative and downsides of how kids are using this stuff outside work. In the workplace, though, if you just change the terminology and instead of calling it a blog, called it a journal, or called it some sort of soliciting feedback for what the opinions and thoughts are going to be of the leader, then all of a sudden it's got a different connotation. So it's not social is play and it's not work. It's just another way of working for work. It's a more interactive, open and trusted way in which people can work.
Good. And Lucy, would you like to add to that?
Not really. I think I'm inclined to agree with Gareth. If you've got a productivity problem, you've got a productivity problem. I guess if you wanted to be very structured and very rigid about it, you would limit access. Again, I worked with an organisation that embraced social media to a point, and people were given access to social media sites outside of core hours. So before 9 a.m. they could access the social media sites from their desktops, and between 12 and 1. And again, at the end of the day. But I think it's like anything we're having to manage now in a much more fluid, remote working environment, where you've got people working at home, where you've got people who are entitled to access social media, then we need to be setting them KPIs and productivity targets in their individual roles. And surely that ought to be the approach. It's about delivering on results.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's move on to another question, which Al touched on when talking about management layers a moment ago. And this is from Sonia Patel at Fly Dubai. The question is, HR is keen to promote social media internally, but how can we encourage senior managers to see the potential of it? Al, would you like to perhaps pick up where you left off on this topic?
Certainly. What we found was that, and I'm sure every company is going through this, especially the economic situation we're all in, there's a reduction going on Most organisations are finding that the functions are reducing, the workload stays the same, but the resources are going down, the budgets are going down, people are going down. So how do they cope? So the value of this kind of more open way of working means that they're not just within their group anymore, they're now a member of the whole company. And by sharing some ideas and discovering that they're actually working on something somebody has already got an answer to in another part of the company, is helping each other achieve those objectives with less people and less resource. So that's the kind of selling point, if you like, of why they should give this a chance, because they themselves are up against it budget-wise and resource-wise.
And is it your impression that within GSK, senior managers are as engaged in the use of social media as other employees?
That they are. We do still have a few, I'll be honest, we do still have a few who are very apprehensive of this. They're very concerned about what people post or what might be said. In fact, some of them still have a communications department or a member who writes for them. They don't actually write anything anywhere. Now, those days are going. People are looking for an authentic voice, and they're looking for the senior members themselves to engage. And once they've dabbled a little bit and they've discovered much more about what goes on instead of what they're told goes on by the next tier management, it just accelerates the productivity. It makes the employees feel more engaged, and it gives them a new vibrance back to the leader. That's what we found. And our CEO is very much behind that. He wants to hear about issues within the company in a controlled place as early as possible, rather than hearing about it on the news because some disgruntled employee has gone and told somebody outside the company.
Okay. So, Lucy, you have worked with a wide range of clients. Have you found senior managers in those clients who are enthusiastic enough to take ownership of developing social media?
Yeah, I think in the main, it comes back to the point I made about establishing what you're trying to achieve from social media. Again, it's just being clear on what the organisation's strategy is, and if they're going to engage with social media, what's the purpose of that engagement. Again, if I use Liberty as an example, they've got buyers in the business who are sourcing new product line, and they get incredibly excited when they've found that unique product for the store. It's really positive for those individuals to be promoting that externally, and for the customer base to understand the activity going on behind the brand. So there's a very clear expectation as to what those individuals will be using social media for. So I think that would be the message I would be communicating back to a team of senior managers, is if we're going to engage with social media, which we probably ought to be seriously considering given the growth of the phenomena, what's our purpose going to be and what are we hoping to achieve from it? And provided the business reason's clear, then I haven't personally had too many issues with it.
Thanks, Lucy. Gareth, I'm going to invite you to give the initial answer to the next question, which is from M. Ashton at Stevens Scown, I think that's pronounced. How do you choose which social media outlet is best and safest for the business? Are we not now suffering from overload of different formats, which dilutes the effect or effectiveness?
I think generally there's an overload in social media tools that that are publicly available for us to use, and that's just a feature of the way the market is growing. In the internet days in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had a big explosion of stuff on the internet when it became, during the dot-com boom, and over time that just dissipates and things change. And the same is going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. I mean, we can't keep up with all of the platforms. The Me Too's will consolidate. I think it's just the key is to define the purpose and what you're trying to do. So social media platforms exist for us all to do our own personal thing. From a company point of view, it's a matter of understanding what do you want to do. Do you want to create a conversational platform internally Do you want that conversational platform to be private, or do you want it to have some extension into the outside world? And it's just basic questions like that will lead you to, in terms of technology, will lead you down the road of being able to choose a supplier just as you would if you were looking for an HR database or another piece of software. Start with what you're trying to achieve here, and that will guide you, because there are some very robust platforms out there that can help you do those things, and I'll touch on some of those.
Okay, well, I have a related question here, which is from Beth Yorath at SPA Future Thinking. And he is asking, for internal communications, do you recommend a bespoke social media solution for the organization, or to utilize something already in the marketplace? And Facebook and Twitter would be obvious examples there. Al, can I ask for your quick response on that?
Certainly. What we found was we brought in 6 different vendors, different applications from Tibber, Yammer, Cisco's products. There's lots of different ones we brought in. In an hour to 90-minute webinars, they showed anybody who was interested, so it was open to the entire company, to come and see what the product looks like, what it might help them to do, and let them themselves discover what in their business could make use of that technology. The reason we went this route is because we don't want to create something from scratch, but we don't want to bring something in that's very intuitive and quick and easy for people to use. That was paramount for us. We don't understand every part of our business because it's just too diverse. So we need the business users themselves to see how they might use what we offer. And then almost literally voting, they said to us what they would like to see. So yes, off the shelf will work. Every one of them now overlaps with each other. They're all adding features to their tool set so much that they're now all beginning to look the same. So try and find something that fits well with your strategy, your digital strategy, what you're trying to achieve, how will it be used and supported, and think of the bigger picture too. Where is this going to go to next? What might your audience want to do with this kind of technology?
Thank you, Al. That's a very comprehensive answer, so I don't think we need to bring Gareth and Lucy in, which is just as well because we've almost reached the end of our 60 minutes. So I just want to say that you'll be able to access the audio recording of this last hour and all of the presenter slides, and yes, also the details of the poll results, which some people have been asking for. You'll be able to access all of those on the People Management website by the end of this week. I just also want to mention that we have had some technical problems with people accessing this webinar due to the popularity of the subject. We've had capacity problems, which is wonderful from one point of view, and we must apologize from another point of view. And if any members of the audience have got work colleagues who have been frustrated in not being able to join us, you could mention that we will be emailing everyone today with the link so that they can get up to speed. So it only remains for me to thank, on behalf of People Management, our 3 speakers today, Gareth Jones, Al Shah, and Lucy Turner, for all of your thought-provoking contributions. I'd like to thank Oracle for sponsoring the webinar and, of course, making it possible for it to be free of charge to the audience. And most of all, thank you for logging in. We hope you found the webinar stimulating and that you'll join us again very soon. Good day.